Okay, now we're going to get into the third lesson: point of view, purpose, and organization. Basically, the questions we're going to be asking of ourselves in the passage is: what does the author think and why? How can the organization of the text reflect this and other things? So, the point of view, POV, and purpose. To get the point of view, you need to stand in someone else's shoes. You can think of a film like Rear Window, where you're taking a look at some event and trying to figure from outside, well, what's going on? What's the author's position? Not your position. It doesn't matter what you think. Your opinion is irrelevant in this instance, okay? It's not what you think. It's what the author thinks. When they ask the point of view, not your point of view, the author's point of view. So get in their head. Examine their motives and bias. And when we think about purpose, we think, why might they argue that particular way? What biases might they have? What might their purpose be? What techniques are used? Literary devices. How can we infer an unstated opinion? Most of the times they're not going to say, hey, I think drilling for oil is great, or hey, I think drilling for oil is bad. You're going to have to infer the point of view of the author from the piece, okay? And sometimes we can infer that opinion by literary devices, allusions, or just blanket opinion statements. Sometimes they will say, I think Arctic drilling's great, okay? The point of view can also encompass the point of view of the narrator of the story or informational text. First person is I. That means it's told from the perspective of often the protagonist, but it could be someone else. But it's told in the first person, from someone's perspective, like your perspective. Third person limited, which means it's told from outside. He went to the store, she went to the store, they went to the store. But it doesn't have information that the characters wouldn't know. Omniscient means there's a narrator that knows everything, even stuff the characters don't know. And that can be important in portraying the point of view and purpose, especially with irony, which we mentioned earlier. Organization. Why is a section in a certain location of a passage? Sometimes this matters. Sometimes the way that an informational text, the way that a literary piece is organized are very meaningful. The most important thing in an informational text is usually up top or at the bottom, because you lead with your most important thing, because people stop reading after that, and you end with something very important. Transition words, those depict organization. Earlier, we talked about that. We'll go a little more in depth later, but someone might introduce something to dismiss it, to say, well, my opponent has said, if you've watched debates, but, and they'll dismiss it, so that way they get it out of the way. Okay, so organization matters, and those transition words would matter. Why is something at the beginning and not the end? Okay, an author may use imagery to set up the scene to give you a better idea of their perspective. Or, like we said previously, an argument may be introduced to be dismissed. Or, this is very clever, not everyone does this, to set up another argument or example. Okay? It's like they're setting a trap. They're clever people. They're like the Ocean's 11 of the Ocean's 11 of authors. Okay? The end is near. We talked a little bit about organization. We talked about introductions. Now we're going to talk about conclusions. And this is vital for organization. You need to know when something's over, and when something's over, you're going to hammer it home. We know when a movie is finished. How? Okay, and you see that thing at the end, it says the end. And they turn the lights on, and you have to leave the theater. Or when you're watching your DVD or whatnot, it hits the end, and it goes off. Okay? But how do we know that in a speech, an informational text, or a piece of literature? It might say the end, but a lot of times it won't. We'll use a concluding sentence or paragraph. You have learned you can use the thesis is, or in this essay I wish to illustrate to show the main idea, usually at the beginning of the essay. We went into a lot of this in our in-depth exercise. We also use concluding sentences to signal the end of a paragraph or a passage. We use phrases like "in conclusion" to summarize, to echo our main idea. We do not introduce new facts or opinions in concluding sentences. You don't put new stuff after the bottom bun of a hamburger, right? That wouldn't make much sense if you put a hamburger patty underneath the bun. It's the same thing. We were talking about hamburger buns, same thing. We do not introduce new facts or opinions in concluding sentences. The conclusion often states similar information to the topic sentence, but does not simply restate it. Okay? This tells us we have moved on to the next idea. You can't just rewrite the topic sentence. You can't just copy paste the exact same thing. You have to say something like, in conclusion, this is why, and you may seg to the next detail. Okay? A paragraph is really a single idea, like a big idea. Okay? And that's it for this time. I'll see you next time.